See you. Good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. So how are you doing?
Good. We're enjoying unprecedented heat here in the UK.
It seems to be going around these days.
Yeah.
So the last picture I saw of you, you had a full head of hair. You've cut your hair off.
It's all gone. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, same with me. I just did this like last week. All my life I've had big hair, and I figured it's time. I'm losing it up here. It's
wow.
Just time to shave it off.
Well, you look great. You too.
It feels so much lighter, doesn't it?
It's a good feeling, yeah. And I'd encourage you to go even a bit shorter, just for fun. Because it's nice to feel that kind of buzz cut.
Yeah. Do you have any still have any ego stuff about hair and vanity and that kind of thing? Do you still wrestle with that at all?
No, not really. I think I mean, if there is any ego, I quite enjoy the sort of feeling of feeling a bit like a monk.
Right.
but then my children soon make me forget that.
So I don't know if you're familiar at all with anything I've done. Probably not. You probably haven't seen. Didn't research me before you said yes to the interview, I guess.
I think I did look. Anton, my business partner, he said I've looked at this guy and it looks like a good one. So I trust his word. So, I don't. That's pretty much how.
Oh well, thanks to Antoine. Anton or Antoine?
Anton, yeah.
Anton.
No, he's very reliable. He's got a good bullshit detector.
Oh, good. Yeah, Anton sounds like a smart guy.
So you made it through his radar. So
his
that's
filter. Okay, good. Awesome. So, first thing I'd like to start with is just philosophical stuff, and then I'd like to get into maybe more specifics about Gene Keys in particular. But you as a
have you started recording?
Yes, yeah. But I'll wipe out some of that beginning stuff.
Yeah, sure.
But I like to keep in just the banter too. To me, it shows a lot more about a person when you're just kind of. For me, the most interesting part of speaking with people is seeing the being. The information is always awesome, but the being themselves and what comes out of them when they're speaking, just about random stuff. I enjoy seeing that about anybody, and I enjoy the interaction.
Great.
So.
Me too, and I'm a lover of dialogue, and I also drink these delicious teas. So I'm sitting here. I'm quite prepared for a wonderful dialogue.
So I'll start with a kind of a general question, but to me it's very specific, and it really says a lot about the person and how they answer it. How would you describe the state of the world today?
Well, in a word, controversially, that's not the word. The word is perfect. And we can unpack that word and what's behind it. Maybe we might take the rest of the call to do that. But that's my one-liner. The state of the world is perfectly where it needs to be, and it's unfolding perfectly, as it always has done. And I think when a person feels that very deeply in their being, then they are finally of use to the world. And if they don't feel that deeply, then they're still on the road towards finding out, to discovering that truth. Oh, dogs just popped through the window. Yes. There we are.
Fortuitous. I see the nose. There we go.
Well come and say hello.
Oh, awesome! Hey, buddy.
Hello. Say hello to all the viewers.
Hey, look, we got the same whiskers going on, all of us.
Yeah,
all three of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I love the animal kingdom.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I mean, having said that, obviously the world is in a mess, looked at from many ways. And it needs our attention and our care and our awareness and our service and our love and sometimes our justice as well, and all those things. So that is the paradox behind my one-liner. It's perfect. Is that it's perfect, but it's also that you can't let that be a reason to not be of great service and improve where it needs improving, which, as we know, is a lot of areas.
So what do you see as what is going on here? What is the journey of awareness here? To be mired in conflict. Anyways, what do you see as the journey, the human journey?
Well, I'd say it's if you allow me to kind of bring it into my work, the Gene Keys, it's embodied in the set of teachings that I'm delivering to the world, and it's embodied very simply through three what I call bands of frequency. And just I like threes, so I like Trinity. So the first one is the shadow, and then I'll tell you what they're called, and then I'll explain them. The middle one is called the gift, and the higher one is called the siddhi, and the siddhi is a Sanskrit word meaning divine gift or divine manifestation. So there are three levels to the answer to your question, I would say. One is we are here to go into our suffering and our shadow and to learn from it, and actually that is the ground. And if we have the courage, when we have the courage to face it and to really go on a journey and explore it to find its source, just as, for instance, Buddha taught and many other great teachers, but I'm not essentially following any one of those lineages. Then we begin to unpack, well, what's really hidden inside this, the reason that we suffer, the reason that the world isn't perfect, through our eyes. And it doesn't feel like that a lot of the time. And so once we go into that journey, we discover, if we're authentic, we discover that there are gifts in that suffering. And that's the middle frequency. That is part of our purpose, is to turn inwards and kind of find go through a transformational journey where the source of our suffering then it reveals a higher purpose, to us. And that higher purpose might come in many ways, so in a relationship, if you really tackle the difficult aspects of the relationship head on with honesty, integrity, empathy, and you learn from it and you acknowledge your faults and all of that, then your love grows stronger and the relationship grows stronger than it ever could have been if you hadn't gone through those difficulties. And then, as an example, and then the highest aspect is the siddhi. And the siddhi is like something that's dormant inside all human beings. It's a sense of us returning to, the highest capacities that we have inside us. So, in other words, returning to you could say our divinity or our wholeness or a state of unity or enlightenment or realization. And that is our final goal, is to get back to that place of union and unification and realize that fully and realize it in our bodies and in our life. So shadow, gift, siddhi is a journey. That's why we're really here. We're here to kind of tackle life and be in life and learn from life and grow and grow through those difficulties, transform them. And the more we transform them and the more we transform them over and over and over again, our frequency rises until we hit that magical place where the memory of who we really are and of what we really are starts to come back to us, and then we realize, a deeply spiritual perspective that's grounded in the world, and we do really remember what we are, which is quite something.
So let's start from the grounded in the world part. So that's somewhat of a linear process, to the point where you're suggesting that we must unravel the moment where we all of a sudden are present and something has taken us. I think you referred to even anchor points or tripwires. Those tripwires where all of a sudden it's like something is not quite computing. What's your suggestion for unraveling those moments, for even becoming conscious of them? Because I know from my experience with people, some people aren't even conscious that they've all of a sudden taken a left turn. You're talking to somebody and all of a sudden, whoop, something's just kind of gone sideways.
Well, my if if I have a technique, then the name I give to the technique is contemplation, the art of contemplation. And actually, I've just written a little book that's coming out soon called The Art of Contemplation. And the essence of the contemplative way is that it gives us an arena so that we can make that inner journey that we were just talking about, to go through those transformations. And there are sort of milestones along the way, or guides that help us. So again, I'd say it has 3 levels. And the first, the beginning, the thing that helps us is pausing, right? So the art, learning how to pause in life. And this is something that our modern human being needs an awful lot to learn, and it's wonderful for us. So pausing is having a kind of awareness that there are moments in our life, there are moments in every day where a natural pause opens up in front of you. And it might be you're sitting, something really mundane, like you're sitting in your car in a traffic jam, and there's a pause and it's been forced on you. What are you going to do in that pause? Are you going to enjoy it, breathe, do something nice, and think positively, or are you going to be frustrated and kind of blow your horn and go, oh, I'm going to be late and all that? So in our day, there are many of those pauses that we can take, that we can enjoy. And even if we begin that technique of just taking a few pauses deliberately, breaths between kind of, because we get into these patterns, these loops of sort of work, and we can be quite manic, right? So the pause gives us a kind of breathing pattern, and the more we find pauses, the more we enjoy them, and the more they open up space, literally space in our day and space in our life, and it actually, they make everything go more smoothly because we begin to relax, and then when we're relaxed, we do things more efficiently. Our timing is better. It's more in tune with everything. A sort of magic to that. So actually, what I share with people is that if you only do that, it will transform your life. You don't need to know anything further than that. Just try that. So I have this kind of fun contemplation. I call it the triple flame, and you can set your clock or your watch or your phone to go off on every 3 of the clock. So 3, 6, 9, 12. You can just set it to go off, and then on those times, and you can not do it overnight if you don't want to, obviously. And then for 3 minutes, every 3 hours, you pause. And when I say that, it's like you might be in a meeting, and so you can't stop the meeting, right? So I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you just for those 3 minutes to have the meeting in a spirit of contemplation, and just bring real awareness to those 3 minutes, whatever you're doing. And maybe if you are doing something active and you can pause, just pause. So sometimes I will pull off the road if I'm driving and just take 3 minutes. And those are my sacred 3 minutes. And in those 3 minutes, I may just breathe. I may think of lovely things. I may just let my life unravel a bit. And that's the sort of that's the first area. So I think that's a real, you obviously know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. That's like opening up the quantum field, right? I mean,
it's exactly. Yeah. Opening up to the potential of magic.
Yeah. And
sorry,
go ahead.
No, go on.
Well, like you were saying, just putting your attention there, it opens up possibilities that weren't even understood. They're not linear possibilities at that point.
Exactly.
And so it has its own growth. I'm sure you're familiar with Gurdjieff, are you?
Yes.
He had something similar in his school, didn't he? Where he had a intermittent bell that would ring in his school, and people have to stop no matter what.
It's a technique many teachers have used.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Over the ages. He called it self-remembering, which is in a sense what you're doing when you pause. You're just remembering. It's only 3 minutes. You're not asking very much.
Right.
The advanced one, by the way, is the buzzer goes off every 3 minutes.
Oh well.
No, just kidding.
There's a dedicated.
So the next phase is called pivoting. right? And that's also a term that comes a little bit from Buddhist thinking. And a pivot, so the pause is actually a thing that you do on the surface a little bit, because you're just slowing yourself down. And then pivoting is something that might occur inside a pause. There's no guarantee. But if it will occur at some point if you take enough pauses. And a pivot experience is when you reframe something differently. It happens spontaneously. You might be rushing somewhere, and then the thing goes off, and it gives you these 3 minutes, or you were going to say something to someone. You were about to pick up the phone in a kind of anger or whatever, or passion, and then that you get your 3 minutes, or you take your pause spontaneously. You have enough awareness to say, just before I do this, let's just have a moment. And in that moment, however long it is, you reframe it. It changes inside you. You just go, oh, I don't want to do this. This is what I always do, and it creates a loop, a problem. Right. And so that is a pivot. That is a moment where your whole awareness changes, and you set off in a new direction, and you literally kind of cut a new groove in your psyche. Right. So they're very powerful things, pivots. They're like they're breakthroughs, right. And they don't happen so often. But if we're pausing, if we're cultivating the art of pausing, then sooner or later pivots will begin to occur in your life, because they just occur naturally. Because as you said, when you open up that quantum field, you're opening up the potential for a shift in awareness, and that's what these pivots are. Awesome. So magical things.
Yeah.
Shall I go on?
Yeah, please, yeah.
So those are pivots. I could say more about them, but because they can often be emotional. For humans, they can be like an emotional thing, an emotional pattern that we break. Right. With enough pivots, in your life, you begin to sort of create a different. There's a new you emerging. I'm talking now maybe, a year or more of practice. So you're pausing. You've had a few of these experiences. It begins to go deeper inside you. The practice of contemplation. And I have a lot of things I haven't said. Is like, how do you contemplate? What do? You can take. There's lots of different entryways into the art of contemplation. It's very rich. So you can think about things and let that thinking kind of use your imagination to really imbue your body with a lovely feeling. You can even pull things from your past, lovely experiences, bring them back into your being, and then kind of linger in them and enjoy them, and then that energy starts to move through your DNA as a physical thing. So you can literally kind of play with your mind and use it as a powerful way of accessing, of sort of releasing chemicals in your body, good, that make you feel good. Some people, they are more physical, they're more kinesthetic. So they don't use the imagination as much, and they just need to breathe or move or kind of stretch or dance or do yoga asanas or whatever it is. Right. That can also be a very powerful way of pausing. Some people mix it up, other people, so there's lots of ways. Right. That's, I kind of mention a lot of them in my little book. It's just kind of access points for people. Yeah. So with enough pivots occurring in your life, and a lot of those breakthroughs, you begin to kind of enter a new field. And the final third step of contemplation, which occurs kind of organically, I call it merging. And it's when you begin to kind of, life starts to come much closer to you. Like the barriers that are keeping you apart from others, from experiences, the things that you're kind of pushing away unconsciously, those start to, your edges start to soften, and life starts to kind of come through the cracks at you. Right. And what that means is your heart begins to open up and accept more, and sort of feel more. It means you let in more of the world's pain, but your heart has grown open more, so you're able to kind of transform that. Whether it's other people suffering or wherever it comes from, it might be your own as well, your own process, but you're able to just encompass more. And merging is, it's kind of inspired a bit for me by the Sufis, who are these wonderful mystics from the deserts, still existing, Arab deserts, and they're they speak about the divine or the highest aspects of consciousness as the friend. So they call it the friend. And so the Sufi way that I've learned from is make everything your friend, make everyone your friend, so bring things closer. So if you start to look at life as your friend instead of your things as situations as your enemy, this situation that's occurring to me right now, this person shouting at me, they're my friend. This is my friend. This is not an enemy to fight. There's something in this. I've got to breathe in, open to it, allow it to teach me. Right. And the more you kind of begin to do that, the more you start to merge, and you don't lose your center because you develop your center through the pivoting, you actually develop a stronger sense of self and love. So the merging is not a kind of, it's not a sort of...
it's not a loss of individuation.
Exactly. Thank you. Well put. It's a healthy merging where you actually retain your center, but you allow life in, and eventually that merging kind of starts to, it puts you into that state that I mentioned earlier, the siddhis, these higher states, which come through the heart being open more often, and then that catalyzes hormones inside our endocrine system and our brain that allow us to access higher states of consciousness. And I say that because that's a stage rather than a state. It's a stage that takes discipline, time, focus. A state is something that maybe comes and goes.
Right.
A stage is something that has to be earned. So a state, you can take ayahuasca or some medicine or something, and you get a state. But a stage is something that takes, hard graft in the world over a long period of time, transformational work. So anyway, I've done a lot of talking, but I've started the introduction to why I think the world is perfect.
Well, the one thing that does seem to happen more and more with the opening of these awarenesses is paradox. We just even the simple paradox that the concept of oneness, but the concept of oneness, each particle, each fractal has to be one within one. And I saw some video with you earlier, and you were mentioning, maybe you were talking about one of the gates, and you'd mentioned that it's not a loss of individuality.
It's I think I know what you're getting at. It's because you use the word individuation, which I also use, which I think it was Jung that maybe coined that term. I like it, and in my programs and things that I'm sharing with the world, the first stage really is to develop a sense of individuation. It's develop a backbone. In a way, you could say even to kind of have a rounded ego, right. A rounded sense of who you are, and to heal some of those resentments or disappointments that have happened to you and the difficulties from your past, and to begin to let things go, and just to have a better life, and to feel better about yourself, and to increase your self-esteem and those really critical things. Right. And that's a really important part of the journey, and it's a long part for many people. Right. Because it takes a lot of work, and sometimes it's therapy, or it's friendships, or it's workshops, or it's relationships, and it's all the things that happen in our rich lives. But I think over time, what we're doing is we're developing a healthy sense of self. And I don't know if it was Gurdjieff who said this, but it was someone like him that said, you in order to give up your ego, you first of all need to have an ego worth giving up. Right. So that's what I see as individuation. It gives you that backbone, that sense of, okay, this is me, I'm in the world. And it's sort of in my map, it's the shadow to the gift. Right. So now, and then the gift of the siddhi is another leap in consciousness, because that's like you're manifesting your gifts, and now what's next? How do I take that further? Right. So
it's almost like the shadow, it creates the density and that can be moved by the gift into the siddhi.
Yeah, exactly. Or often, I say seed, flower, fruit. Right. So the shadow's the seed, the gift is the flower, and then the fruit drops, out from the flower, so it fruits from the flower, and then the fruit also contains the seed inside it. So the shadow and the top and the bottom are very linked. Yeah.
So is there a collective example of this as well? Are we working through a collective trinity, moving through shadow into city?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. The way I kind of sometimes look at it is there are two big groups of people in the world. I mean, if you look at that, there are those at the shadow consciousness, and there are those at the shadow consciousness. That's a much bigger number.
Right.
That's most of the people in the planet.
Right.
Because they're caught in those loops and stuff. And then there are those who are beginning to awaken, and there are more and more of them all over the world, and probably most of the people listening to this fit into the gift category, fit into this category of people who are awakening and beginning to explore these things, and they want to understand their suffering, and they have a question inside them that's strong enough to get them to listen to something like this and go on with it, and then explore it deeper and ready to transform. So you've got these two groups in a way, and this is a much smaller group, the gift group. It's a group of people who are individuating, and then you've got like one or two people at the city in the world, not many, one or two masters and great beings, and some who are invisible anyway, but they're kind of, it's there in the field, and they're always there because they're the seed, inside us. So we always recognize it and look that and see it, and especially when you're in this middle group, you really start to feel it more strongly, and you know that there's something inside you much greater and much more boundless, and you're kind of, there's more of an urgency, a good sense of urgency, like I've got to find this now.
Determination. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so those two groups, in a way, it's interesting how they're connected to each other, because the middle group, the people who are kind of forming their healthy sense of self, are then looking to make the quantum leap to the city, and the group at the shadow are also looking, they want to make this quantum leap to the gift, right? So you see in the kind of mass consciousness also beginnings of that stirring of people more open-minded, people, who are, I don't know whether it's Oprah Winfrey or whoever it is, but it's the people who are influencing large numbers of people to think differently about life. And science is also opening up that through quantum physics and things. It's opening up doorways, and the sustainable movements and all these kind of things, these positive things in the world where people are asking these deep questions of us as individuals, as a species. So there's an awakening in that level. So what's interesting is to consider how those two groups are related.
Right.
So when the mass group begins to shift in its frequency, it almost gives the higher group the lift to make its quantum leap, and vice versa. Right. So when this group, you see how it's like tide.
Yeah.
And so for us, like, it's kind of it's a game that's occurring, and my whole teaching in Gene Keys that came through me, still coming, is that this is the time we're in. We're the time of this quantum leap, and it's coming, and we're beginning to see it. We're going to see, like, we're going to make the leap over there, and then these people are going to make the leap up here, and we're all going to help each other. And everything's tied up in this, like even like the other hierarchies, like animals and birds and things and minerals and creatures, everything is connected in this chain of life. So everything's going to move up a level in the way of awareness and evolution. So there's a big, that's what's at the heart of Gene Keys, right? My transmission is like there's a big quantum leap in the air. Right. So yeah.
And you can really see it in the world. Obviously, it's going so dramatic in every direction. It's
exactly
like it's going to get crazier as it gets saner, right?
It's likely to, yeah. I mean, it really is, because the phoenix is born out of the ashes, and so there have to be fires, and things have to kind of crumble and fall apart in order for the new to rise up. So I'm talking in terms of the systems of our world, and yes, there's probably quite a lot of chaos needed for change. It's always the way.
And that's another paradox in a way, isn't it? That it's hard for people to grasp. The fact that everything is perfect right now, even though it's so disastrous right now. But that disaster it allows for the contrast to be visible and to be present.
Absolutely, there's grace in it. Yeah, there's grace in the difficulty always.
So it's a matter. I guess it's a matter of, you used the term ruthlessness. I don't know. Are you familiar with Carlos Castaneda?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah,
a little bit. Okay, because I've noticed you use a few terms that they use too. So I'm always curious. Syntax is always interesting between people because there's always subtle differences on what that implies, particularly people who have a sophisticated understanding of what's going on. So in a way, is it a matter of the ruthlessness of the individual, not the detachment, but the ability to not attach? Because a lot of these people who are attached to the world are almost as radical. They're as radical as the people that are the opposite end of that spectrum. Is the world here to breed awareness, or is it here to be saved and to be, do you know what I mean? Anthropomorphized. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm asking? Was it very clear, or am I being too vague?
Kind of. You're almost there. Say a bit more, just to.
Okay, we'll go into as how you see what the collective is moving towards. Is it moving towards an awareness on the earth, or is it moving towards an awareness that transcends the earth as well as us? Do you see us as going into a whole new level of awareness, or is it one on earth where we suddenly learn how to become, we're able to live together and we're able to, clean up the toxins, and you know what I mean? Is it that?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's always been about bringing the spirit down into the form, not rising up and escaping the form. Right. Spiritualizing the form, or the myth of heaven on earth, heaven coming to earth. So for me, that's what it is. It's about we got to do it down here. We've got this. That's the final piece of the evolutionary jigsaw. Bring these higher planes of consciousness right down into the core of our bodies, right into the core of our society, so that we can live those higher frequencies on the earth plane, and Gaia, because we are Gaia. We're all part of Gaia. We're Gaia's. We're her brain or her heart, or we're part of that. So yeah, it's about, for me, definitely, it's about not so much saving the planet, but bring.
Do you know why I bring this up?
I think.
Sorry. Yeah. No. Please finish.
I think it's not so much saving the planet as kind of being saved, within the planet. We are, because we are part of it.
Right.
And so it's like we save ourselves. That's the human responsibility, that we are the ones with self-awareness. So we have a bit more self-responsibility. We have more responsibility than the other creatures that share the planet with us. So yeah, we are ultimately, for me, we're gardeners. I'm a keen gardener, and I love working with the earth. And we are here to be gardeners. And this is a garden. This is the Garden of Eden, and we have to look after it. And that's what we're here to do. And not just in a kind of physical way, but also to understand it right to the highest dimension. So to understand that the earth is actually a kind of mirror of the cosmos, and to really understand that and embody that, that the entire cosmos is here within the earth, within our body, within our DNA. It's all here. So there's no reason to try and go elsewhere.
Right. So diversity is the plan of the cosmos, is it not? To diversify.
Mm-hmm.
And we are the I guess the living fractal of that diversification consciously playing itself out. So what I'm wondering is, when you're talking about the transcendence of, in a way, it's the physical plane of interaction. A lot of people are saying, that I speak with, are that now is a time where the Earth, we are a part of the Earth, as you were saying, but its transcendence doesn't necessarily mean on the physical plane, even though you bring it here. That by bringing it here, it transcends to something that isn't inconceivable to us. So some people say that by turning it into an action of like cleaning up the pollution in the oceans, what you're still doing is living in the matrix. That by transcending the Earth, you take that and it becomes awareness that is inconceivable to us now, but it is the Earth, but it's not on a physical plane where we're all having to push a button to talk to each other and to. Do you have any understanding of that with the evolution of the solar plexus? Does that imply anything in that towards that end?
Yeah, I think what we're getting at is action. Action that comes from truth. Action has to come from truth. It has to come from a place of truth, not a place of reaction.
Right.
And not even a place of revolution.
Right.
Right. Although revolution can be positive. Right. It's got to come from, for me, it's almost got to come from another plane entirely. It's got to come from ecstasy. Right. It's got to come from a place where we are so, our heart is so open that it's out of that place that we know exactly what we're here to do on the physical, emotional, mental plane. And, so that's, the way I see it is we are, part of the theatre, part of the drama of the Maya that we live in, is that we also get to kind of beautify it, and we do get to transmute our mistakes, and we do get to clean it up. And I met a guy the other day, for example, at my local school, and I had a conversation. I said, "What do you do?" And he's a I have to remember the exact word. It's like he works in this area of synthesis and biology. And so what he does is he creates microorganisms that can break down other organisms, right? And I said, wow. And we had this fascinating conversation, and he's a top professor at a top university in London. And I was like, oh, suddenly having this amazing discussion. Well, I was just listening to him because he was just fascinating. And anyway, there are technologies coming into the world that through gifted people, whose hearts are drawing them into these arenas where they can create things that actually will clean up the planet. But that's actually his higher purpose, because when you find your higher purpose, then you just enact your higher purpose, and everyone has a different higher purpose, so that was his higher purpose, to create these microorganisms that can break down plastics, for example, in a natural way that then doesn't release toxic byproducts. Right. So everything that we've done that causes a mess, we can rectify, and so I see it as like, that would be part of our journey. Part of our journey is to actually beautify again, the consciousness of this planet. We owe it that, right? It's our mother. Why would you then leave your mother in a mess and then take off to some Syrian system,
Well, I think that the idea behind the concept that I was talking about was that, as you were mentioning, their Earth awareness is linked to our awareness, that when we transcend, the Earth transcends. And we are transcending the Earth by having by being its molecules playing out on this planet, moving around. We are the Earth as well. So when we transcend the Earth transcends this plane as well. Like that professor, for instance, does he have an awareness of his being, or is he compelled to be a scientist? Do you know what I mean? Like, does that of interest to you?
Well, he may be one of those people that's making the leap from the shadow to the gift. Right. Okay. Right. And so he has a great higher purpose in that, to take that kind of suffering energy and transmute it on behalf of others, and you can imagine what kind, you can imagine what kind of good karma he will unlock in doing that kind of thing, he will accelerate his evolution through that service hugely. So actually he may have found a shortcut through his spiritual evolution, by being of such great service to, because the greater service you are, the more people and organisms you touch, the more you accelerate your evolution. Right? So even like a small tiny thing like that seems tiny could ripple out and affect so many things in people and beings. So there are great mysteries in finding our higher purpose,
right.
Even if we aren't yet fully aware of why we're doing it.
Well, this is kind of a touchy thing in a way, isn't it? Because it's like I had a bit of background in environmental studies, and one of the studies that we learned about is that as soon as scientists start manipulating what's already been done, like you introduce a foreign species into a land, so you bring another species in to counteract that species, which of course it never works. It creates more disaster.
Yeah.
It just seems almost that anybody who projects solution is just adding to the problem. Do you know what I mean by that? I don't mean to attack this fellow, because I'm sure his intentions are pure. I just mean that from my own way through this world, watching people and seeing what happens through good intentions or selfish intentions or whatever intentions, that if it doesn't come from a place of awareness, it's always going to be corrupted in some way.
Can definitely be the case. Definitely can be the case. And yet there are also situations in which those things can work out positively. Sustainable movement is definitely a good movement. Biodynamic is definitely a good step towards Earth custodianship. So anything that works with natural organisms within a natural way and kind of understands the synthesis of all beings, is probably going to be a good thing. I agree. If it's like isolation and it's kind of if it's just trying to fix a problem at the kind of like modern medicine does, but without going to the source of the problem, it's going to cause more problems, more side effects. Right. So I think it's about, there are technologies that are useful and there are ones that kind of make things worse.
Right. But like you were saying, like at the beginning of our interview, was that even the things that make it worse are part of the process to make things perfect. It's part of the perfection. So it's so sophisticated. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a theater, we're in a theater.
That finds its equilibrium, right? Always.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about, there's a few things I wanted to specifically ask you about, unless you had more to say about this, because, I don't nearly have your eloquence. And as far as I'm concerned, you can keep talking for an hour, and that's fine with me. I have an undefined throat, and that oftentimes I have a trouble putting my thoughts into linear mode and expressing them. So I really admire people that really can do that well, and you're one of the best ones I've ever heard, I have to say.
Well, thank you. I also have an undefined throat, by the way.
Good for you. Wow. Because you've mastered that, because you're a very good speaker.
Well, thank you. The human design system is I have a lot to thank for, because it helped me find my true rhythm in life, and it did deprogram an old part of me, and it led me to transcend the system itself. That's another story, and move into even kind of higher places, more integrated places and fields. But I deeply acknowledge it as an incredibly useful tool. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, as I've just started getting to the gene keys, because I've only discovered or heard of human design a few months ago, and I see its usefulness at the beginning of the process of self-awareness, because it's I only judge things on whether it works for how I understand things, like I guess we all do, if it makes sense to me. And everybody I know, it explains them in sophisticated details, and it explained myself in sophisticated details. And by knowing that information, it freed me, it expanded me, and that's the sign of something that's got power to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's lacking, that I noticed right away, was the same thing that I heard you talk about, which you seem to address with Gene Keys, which is a more of a transcendental aspect to this information. This information is like, to me, human design is like describing the character that we've been placed into the matrix with. But what Gene Key seems to be doing, and again, I don't know enough about it. I'm still looking into it. And I wasn't even sure if I should talk to you yet because I don't know it enough yet to really ask you really good questions about that.
Well, ask me what you'd like to know since you've got me here.
Well, I'm asking you about your view of the world right now. But if you'd be interested, maybe in a little bit, once I do have a little more information, I would ask you specific questions. But there's enough here to keep us going for sure that I will ask.
Sure.
What I wanted to ask you was, you mentioned something about that we're going to a 9-centered being and then to a 3-centered being. And 3s are very important to my understanding of everything as well. And that was very interesting to me. Because you seem to have taken human design to the next level from what I'm interested in, to a level of sophistication that is more along the lines where I'm going. So I'd like you to, if you could explain that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a very mystical question, one that I haven't really talked about actually publicly. But I obviously mentioned that at some point. Yeah, my kind of understanding is, it's different from Ra, who's the founder of the human design system. We're very different people, and I knew him well, and we were very fond of each other. Well, I was fond of him. I'm not sure how fond he was of me at the end, but I remained fond of him. So I don't know. I assume that he was just like an angry uncle kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. He may have just continued accepting me. My understanding is you don't, to go higher up in an evolutionary, to shift gears in an evolutionary capacity, you don't go to a more complex vehicle. You actually go to a simpler vehicle. But that simpler vehicle is able to contain the diversity of the complexity. So everything gets condensed and simplified, but you don't lose anything. Like, you're not going back in evolution. It's holographic, right? So everything just is much more organized and much more efficient. So that's why, for me, my understanding was always that the 9-centered being that human design proposes or talks about is actually a kind of a passing through stage. It's a mutative stage that's going to lead to a 3-centered being, which is actually the 9 in 3 threes. So it's, that's what it is. It's like the mystic trinity. And Ra had sort of, he spoke about that actually. He even suggested that, but his language was a little different from mine, and his take on it was a little different from mine. Mine was a little bit more optimistic than his. So yeah, the 3-centered being, which I have never spoken about, but I can see it in my mind's eye, is if you take the whole I Ching, right? Because the Gene Keys and human design is based on the I Ching, the 64 codes of life, right? The codes of the Maya that we live in, the matrix, as we call it. That is the programming language of the matrix. These 64s within 64s within 64s, and it's this incredible kind of structure that we live inside of that we're not aware of most of the time until we begin to wake up, and then the codes begin to kind of show us gaps in the programming field, the within the matrix, what was it I was saying? Yeah, the 3 threes. When you look at the 64 hexagrams, what I call the 64 gene keys, I did a course recently called Dare to be Divine. You might enjoy it actually. It's on it's in Gene Key Society. So if you go into Gene Key Society, you can become a member of Society and you get that course for free. It will be released this year widely. So it's not a widely seen course, but it's really cool. And in it, I look at the code of the I Ching, and there's a code within the I Ching. And so when you take all the hexagrams, these codes, and then you distill inside each one, is another hidden hexagram. They're called nuclear hexagrams, right? So these are, for people that don't understand this, I'm talking about a code within a code, right? And you don't need to understand the mechanics. That's for kind of geeks like me. and you. And so you you distill the code within the code, and you actually come down to 16 hexagrams, right? So from 64 you get it down. You look inside each one, and you realize inside each one of these, are only 16. And then when you do it again into those 16, so in other words, you look inside those hexagrams and you find the hidden hexagram, the hidden symbol, you get down to 4, right? And so you get down to 4 gene keys, hidden, a code within a code within a code kind of thing. Yeah. So what you're actually doing is you're showing the fundamental, essential programming language of the entire cosmos.
Awesome.
In those 4 keys. Wow. And some people call them the 4 faces of God, or you can call them, there's always like words for those things. Yeah. What I understand is that is a kind of a 3-sided triangle with one in the middle, and so those, if you were to kind of make a kind of graph of that being, of that vehicle, because that's our future vehicle, each of the 9 centers would be in one center. So you'd have the 3 awareness centers in one center, and then you'd have the 3 directional centers in one center, and then you'd have 3 motor centers in one center, and they would be So what you'd end up with is this 3-sided Trinity being, a higher vehicle, with a center in the middle that kind of the G center, what in human design is called the G center, which is where you kind of how the vehicle steers through space and time, geometry. I can't really go into that in any more depth, but it's sort of one day I'll probably put it out there as a kind of idea for people to contemplate on, because that's how I see a kind of an essentializing of consciousness, and for that we need a much more effective vehicle. And in that vehicle you can't like if you look at the human design one, there's all kinds of like flaws. Right. In that it's kind of mess, right. Actually. Yeah. And you can but also, as Ra taught, the circuitry of it is changing. So our biocircuitry is changing. Right. The mutation of our being, of our solar plexus, the transformation of our species is changing that matrix. And it's going to be unrecognizable, as you said, like we're going to be unrecognizable. So, but the thing is, we actually won't need a matrix at that point. We won't need a graph. We won't need it because we're going to be it. Right. So you don't need a map when you're in it. So there's not really any sense in like having a system, right? Because at that point you're out of the system. But from looking at it from this side, you could it's a bit like looking at what the future might hold.
Well, it's like a quantum system, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it is. Yeah. It's a quantum biovehicle that can break the laws of time and space, basically. And that's why in that course I did, it was about the 64 cities. It was about these higher states of consciousness that exist within all human beings, and the different manifestations of those higher states, of the self-realized states. So in a way, it's a map of the enlightened state. So when you look at different enlightened teachers, which I did in that course, I took many examples and showed, look, the behavior of this one or the teaching of this one looks like it's in contradiction to this one. But actually it's because the different cities are playing out in their own way. Right. But it's the same truth at the core, right. Manifesting, right. But through a different kind of archetype. Right, right. So that, what Gene Keys shows you, and, is it shows you, I don't know any other map that shows you this. It shows you your enlightened state, what it's going to look like, what it looks like now, and what it will become, and how it will be expressed. And that might sound like it's taking you out of the now, but it depends on you. Like if right. You know what it feels and looks like, you can kind of prepare yourself. You can dream it in. You can dream that future in right. to the now. Right. And I think that's a really important thing. Like a friend of mine recently, I spoke to him and I just kind of, we had, have one of those conversations and you kind of know that there's something not quite there. There was some kind of wiring not quite right in like that in what he was saying, and I just had the feeling, I just like, you know what it is, you've lost the faith.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to have a certain faith in the higher consciousness,
Right.
like, because you can be overly objective. You know, many people like that. It's overly objective, like so objective that you don't actually have any sense of fun anymore.
Right. Right.
You know, and you've got to embrace that childlike quality of the innocence of your being, and go, wow, what if I could live forever?
Right.
You know, what if
Right.
I could do anything?
Right.
You've got to embrace that. That's the new consciousness. You've got to be like a child again. You've got to have that heart of a child. You've got to open to the majesty and the magic of
Possibility.
life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to have that sense of fun and play, and I think that's really important. It's missing in a lot of spiritual paths.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Well, it's
needed.
And that dreaming it into reality that you were mentioning, or wasn't that the second part of those three things you were talking about earlier? My memory is not good for terms, but remember you're saying that the first part is to
the pivoting.
The pivoting. Isn't that pivoting? When you dream.
Yeah.
When you dream things into your reality.
Yeah. You open up to it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So can you talk a bit about the solar plexus transformation, because that seems to be something that I think that everybody will see, you know, that is experiencing now to some degree.
Yeah. Well, to talk about that, you have to kind of go back to the womb in a way and understand the cycles of how what I call the sacred wound is passed along through generations from the beginning of time. So the beginning of our story as kind of beings, you know, who believe they're separate. You know, let's say it began at the Big Bang. You know, I have to kind of be a bit allegorical here and tell a story. It began at the Big Bang, and at the Big Bang, let's say in the kind of language of Ra, of human design, he had a nice way. He said, you know, there was a crystal of consciousness, and the crystal shattered, you know, and it shattered into fragments, and those fragments then spiraled out into the cosmos and formed stars and planets and eventually life and all kinds of stuff. And they were fractals, you know, so it was like fractions that were kind of spiraling out in their, you know, in their patterns, in a beautiful pattern, but then also seemingly randomly creating kind of life and forms and things. And what was happening is it is kind of in a way a wound opened up, or you know, because for that to happen, then life was then going to, you know, all it wanted to do was fill the hole at the core, you know, that had split. So it wanted to find its way back the moment that shattering took place. And so that's actually why the Maya was created. That's why planets and things formed, because like the heart of everything is this black hole, you know, is this kind of vacuum that I call the sacred wound, that there's something missing. There's something missing in everything. There's a feeling of there's something missing. You know, let's go out and find what it is. That's evolution. The force of evolution is let's go out and find out what it is. Let's try and fill this hole. Let's try and, I mean, it's funny that the word whole is the same as the word whole.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
with a W.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what's happening. So when you look at the point of conception, right, it's like a microcosmic Big Bang. You know, and even we even call that a bang, you know,
Right.
a big bang. There's this kind of explosion, this rupturing, this shattering, this, you know, and then there's the formation of life, and so in a way, what happens is that is a representation of that same energy at the core. So when we're conceived, it's like we're a mirror of the cosmos being conceived, and we carry this question mark, this question in us. How am I going to get back home? How am I going to get back home? Every cell has that. How am I going to get back to the whole? How am I going to fill this hole at the core? And that's our life. So our life is built around that feeling of there's something wrong, you know, there's something missing. Maybe not wrong. There's something missing. That's a better way of putting it. and that's us. So we go out into the world and we feel that something missing, and we live our lives trying to kind of understand that something that's missing. And but in the womb, it's based. That's where it comes from. The black hole is actually in our belly. Because that's where we grow from. So we grow in the womb of our mother from that place, and that's where the sacred wound is passed along through the umbilicus, and then we come out 9 months later, and that umbilicus is cut, and again there it is, we're cut off. At every turn there's this thing that's missing, and we're disconnected from it. How are we going to get back? So if the body is a microcosm of the cosmos, which it is, then the core of it is in the belly, is in the solar plexus, which is what the ancients have always known, which is why, the center point is called the Dantian by the Taoists, or the Hara by the Japanese, and there's all kinds of names for it, like it's the omphalos, it's the center of the world, the navel. That is where there's even a hole there in our bodies, and that's the wound, and it's not just there. It's actually in every cell of our being. It's at the core of every kind of nucleotide of our DNA. It's the core of everything, is this wound. But in our body, it's localized there. So in the gut and in that area is where the transformation of consciousness must take place. It's where the return to our source must take place, because
So the wound becomes the pathway.
Word. Sorry?
So the wound becomes the pathway.
Exactly. A lovely word for it that I don't know who came up with it, is the one point. There's this tiny infinitesimal point at the core of our being, is that black hole, and we have to go back down through that hole. And where it leads to is it leads to everything. It leads to the white hole on the other side. It leads to everything. It leads to God. It leads to the way home. And then we're connected back again. So we have to kind of go down in that. And that's our life's journey, is to go inwards, even as we're outwards in the world, is that we have to look inwards and find the source of our suffering and return, and transform through that black hole. And that's why all the work is really done in the cauldron of the belly. So all our emotional processing is done there, and it's literally where the gut is. So it's where all the shit is, in us. It's like it's literally all in there. It's where the ancestral karma is. It's in the gut is like a huge body of kind of bacteria that is not us. 90-something% of our DNA is actually not us. It's bacterial. And that means that there's only a tiny bit that's us, that what we consider us. The rest is like this microcosmic being that actually is alien, in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what that's all in the belly. That's all in the gut. That's and scientists and biologists are exploring this all the time, and realizing the power of that kind of that center, that place of our body. The awareness, that there's actually an awareness. There's a rudimentary awareness to those bacterial forms, and I always love the kind of poetry of, the God is in the detail. In the tiniest things are the greatest, power. Always the way. I love that sort of poetry. The last shall be first. And so in that. In that place inside us, that's where our awakening will come from, because we all have that bacteria. It's like when you go out to the sea at night on a fine, in a lovely area, and you see that phosphorescence that from the sea creatures, the microscopic sea creatures. They're a similar kind of creature. They can create their own light, and really that's what that bacterial kind of colony inside us is about. It can carry awareness beyond the body, it literally it's part of the quantum field. It connects us to the quantum field, because it's just so complex. It's like they call it the abdominal brain.
Right.
but at the moment it's a reverse of the brain with the grey matter and the white matter. It's opposite, so it actually has intelligence.
Right.
And so there's this part of us that, as many people are disconnected from their bellies. This area of the body they don't connect with. So it's really important. Like, one of the things I teach most is making friends with your belly. Right. You hold your hands on it, you love it, you move your hands in a kind of slow circle around there. You begin to bring awareness and touch and love, and you let it feel. You let your body feel your love. You begin to heal your own wounds that way. So it's really a sweet practice, that, and your heart actually is open from your belly. Many people don't know that. So the softer your belly, the softer your heart opens. In the chakra system, that's also a teaching. Obviously, it's true. You have to go through the belly in order to get to the heart and then the higher centers. So there's a magic in there, in that area of our body, and that's where the future transmutation of our species is going to come from, because it's by transmuting the shadow, that we move on, and that's what the belly's all about.
So why is it 2027? Why is that the pivotal, or the year that's representing the shift?
So those are dates that Ra was given. I kind of see a trinity of dates. 1987, I get which was harmonic convergence. 2012, which I call melodic resonance. These are musical metaphors. Yeah. And then 2027, I call that rhythmic symphony. And so those three things, harmony, melody, rhythm, are kind of describing the arc of this awakening. So it's in this period of time, that an awakening is seeded on our planet for the future. And that's really all it is. It's just seeded. So those who are kind of very involved in it will know exactly what I mean. That we're planting a seed now that will ripen over many, many thousands of years and actually give rise to a new kind of human. But you're going to have, as Ra suggested, which I completely agree with, you're going to have two different species, in a way, living together. It's happened before in our past, Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon man, and now we're going to have, Homo sapiens, as he's called, and what I call Homo sanctus, which is like the sacred human who knows what it is in a much wider capacity and has gifts that are far beyond the regular human. And it's going to be an interesting time that happening. So but it's almost like a virus, that's going to spread. A good virus.
Right. So why 2012? What happened in 2012?
For me, 2012 was a kind of ring past not. Is a good word, expression. It means if you had not begun your journey of awakening by 2012, in some respect, then your DNA is kind of locked out of the new program. It's a kind of it's a vanishing point. It's a kind of a fulcrum, right? And there's no kind of judgment in that.
Right.
There's DNA that's going to be taken, that's going to leave the world, and there's DNA that's going to mutate and change. And that was the point at which there's no going back. You had to be in. You had to have your passport stamped by then. And that's my kind of metaphorical way of understanding that date. And so melodic resonance is like it's mean you're feeling that you're beginning to feel, you're realizing that actually the joy in you, of the melody of life is like what you want to tune yourself to more powerfully than the old pattern, the old patterns that were taking energy away. So it's almost like, and you can still be very fallible and fall back down into the shadow, but there needs to be more of you moving upwards than there's moving downwards. And so that's the kind of cutoff point. And then now we're in the move towards 2027, which is not far away, at which point my understanding is that the shift that we spoke about earlier will take place. The shift from the shadow to the gift in the mass consciousness beginning. It won't happen all at once.
Right.
But beginning, you'll see larger numbers moving, and the shift from the gift of the core, what I call the core fractal. Which are a group of people who begin to experience the cities, who begin to experience higher states and collective intelligence, because those are the people in whom collective intelligence will begin to dawn. Small groups of people who've been working towards this goal for a long time, who need to find each other at specific times and locations around the world, and when they come together, that consciousness will begin to dawn. It will begin to open up like flowers, through the collective. Yeah.
It's so
It's
funny.
quite magical. It's a magical story. I mean, I kind of sound mad. But
No, you know what? I wish. Sometimes I wish, because I know I know people and speak to people who have the same vision from a totally different angle, but it's the same story, and including the fact that it needs to be a conscious connection. That the geometry, the geometry of these forces need to be connecting. It's a collective consciousness, and a collective consciousness is one of individuated consciousnesses grouping together into a collective. Not, So you're what you're saying is along the same lines as these other people that I consider to be at the pinnacle of their archetype. Right?
Yeah.
So for me personally, find my role, as I see it, is for my curiosity, but also to help make these connections, right? Because to me, you're one of those connections. Yeah. And I recognized it immediately when I saw you speaking that you're transmitting something pure.
Yeah.
But like I say, I there's quite a few others that I know of that are doing that too, but from a totally different perspective, but are saying the same thing, and their experiences of it differently. There's another fellow that I speak with he's along the lines of cross causality. He's a dreamer, and for him it also the link to the double, what he calls a double. We have three attentions, and the third attention is what projects us as a fractal, but it also is a fractal of something. But it's what projects us, and its link to it is through our belly. His dreaming is through his belly to reach that.
Yeah.
So it's all these different stories that are the same, but people are having their different ways of
through different lenses.
Different lenses, right?
Yeah. You see, once you go into the matrix and you unlock it, however you do it,
right?
You find the same code,
right?
So you find the same truths,
right? Yeah, totally.
But you refract it through a slightly different variation of the story,
right? And that's all the archetypes. That's the archetype that's been taken to its evolutionary peak.
Yeah.
When you find it from your archetype. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I always get charged when I meet somebody like that. It's like, it's like there's a.
Yeah. Well, it's great that you're so in resonance with it as well, because it means that you can connect all these different stories together.
Oh, I recognize it immediately. Yeah, totally. It's like I get such a boost out of it. I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I love you. I think you're awesome. Right? Like you're like a clear of light. Another clear beam of light.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it's
So, anything else you want to know?
Oh, there's tons, but
you can ask me. You can be more specific if you want. Well, one of the things I like to do sometimes is kind of pick on gene keys. So pick on something in your design, something in your profile, that that has a specific, that you may have a question about.
Okay. Let me ask you something then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If this is along the lines you're saying, I have in astrology, I'm a moon conjunct Saturn.
Yeah.
And in human design, it's the 49th gate that makes a what do you call it? With the makes a channel.
Yeah.
To the what I'm saying, right? For 19.
Yeah. 49 with a 19. Yeah.
So and it's both my Saturns. My design Saturn is the 19. And my personality Saturn and Moon is the 49. So it creates a channel. And I'm a 63 with my sons.
Mm-hmm.
So that's so if you do you use astrology as having meanings? Does the planet have a meaning for you as well as what gate it is?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. But I see that slightly differently through these sequences. So when you explore the sequences in the Golden Path, which I don't know if you've started to do yet.
I'm just at the periphery of it.
Yeah. So when you do that, you'll really begin to see how the planets kind of come into play in Gene Keys, because I've looked at them in a different way from human design. I've taken them away from the body graph, although if you know the body graph, you'll integrate them in naturally. But I made it simpler for people who so that they didn't have to learn human design and its intricacies. And all they needed to do was follow these sequences of codes of gene keys, through these gates.
Mm-hmm.
And that unlocking those one at a time, one by one, is actually what creates the awakening in us. So that starts with your life's work. That starts with your personality sun. And it ends with your personality sun as well.
Okay, you know what? Actually, I'm just looking at the Gene Keys chart, and you don't even use the 49 or the 19, so that's not part of the...
Well, not in that chart, but it'll appear somewhere else.
Oh.
There are kind of other sort of more hidden things that come online as you go deeper into the matrix.
See, this is why I was kind of I was hesitant whether I should talk to you yet. Just because I can't ask you sophisticated questions on this, because I don't know what to ask you. Do you know what I mean? So
well, no, it's more like if you have sometimes people say, well, I have this line and this gene key or this code, and I've never really understood it. Can you bring some light on it? That's quite a nice pinpointing way.
Okay, can I ask you one of those then? How about the 63? The 60, if both of your suns make a channel, mm-hmm. I would imagine that's a pretty potent representation of where you're coming from in some way. Is that the case?
You mean so in Gene Key's word, it's the 60, the Gene Key,
right,
and the third Gene Key,
right. So my 60 Gene Key is my personality sun, and my design sun is the 3.
Yeah. So that's that's not uncommon, because you'll see that from time to time as a pattern. Yeah. But it's certainly powerful, and which lines though? That's the kind of key.
2, 2, 5. I'm a 2, 5.
Okay, so the 60 is a 2.
Yeah.
Okay, and the 3 is a 5.
Right.
Yeah. So the 60th Gene Key is very mysterious. It's like, have you read that one in my book yet?
Yeah. I bought that Gene Key from you.
Oh, cool.
It was great.
So it's mysterious because it's it is a kind of the lesson it has to learn is to be real, to be in the world, and to kind of to master the the limits of the world, and because the shadow is limitation, but then the gift is realism, is to actually work with systems and language and things, but not to be stuck and to be ossified by them. So to kind of work with structures, and it's about magic really, because magic requires a structure in order for the magic to take place within a structure. If it's just formless, the magic can't happen. So the 60s is all about needing structures, I wonder what that means, the second line. I sometimes have to just kind of go into the matrix to kind of contemplate that. I'm writing a kind of big opus at the moment that will probably not be available for quite a few years, but where I name every single line. Has got a name, an archetypal name, a bit like Ra did, but very different. And drawn from all cultures, and they're very high frequency names.
Wow, that's an admirable amount of concentration and focus you need, eh?
Yeah,
and contemplation.
It's a lovely project, but because each one of them is a kind of like a mystery or a koan, something that a paradox to be solved.
Right.
I'm not sure I kind of got there with that one. The 60th Gene Key especially is one that I find requires more contemplation than just about any other code, because it's so dense. It's like a really densely packed kind of code in the Maya, because it's the code that sort of creates the unlocking of the world. So it kind of has the potential to shatter not just your illusion, but the illusions of others. It's a kind of miracle potential. I would say, for you, it's your son there, right? Your personal son. So, in a way, that's so your life's work then is to create these. It's quite funny, really, in a way, is to create these systems or ways of thinking, in order that they can then shatter.
Right.
Yeah. And that's very tricky. It's like you create them, but you can't be attached to them. So you're literally kind of creating something in order to undermine it. It's like a teaching that then self-destructs deliberately. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does.
And that's probably how your mind also works.
Well, that's what I want to do with all this information. For me, I plan on making a documentary with and putting together these beings that I think have unlocked information that is vital.
Yeah.
Well, I won't go that dramatic. It's not vital, but what it is it's knowledge. And you're one of those people. I'm hoping that you'd be a part of it as well. But for me, I'd like to integrate all this information so that I could walk somebody through who doesn't have any understanding of anything, and blow their mind so that anything is possible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So that's how you do it. So the 60 is the thing that gives you the structure. So what you need is a really good-looking, real-world structure. So that anyone can look at it. 60 is for the whole world, right?
Right.
So it's got to look good. It's got to kind of have a good rhythm and a flow, and someone recognizable, kind of telling the story, and kind of also be sort of meet some of the kind of criteria that the world needs. Like some science and some understanding, some basis, because that's the structure.
Right.
But what's underneath, this is part of your thing, is the third gene key in the fifth line, and that's nothing but playfulness. Like the third is like the innocence of the child, and the fifth line is actually what you're really doing. That's what you're really communicating. You're communicating something that can't be communicated, and it's coming out in quite a playful way, and it's coming out in quite an infectious way, to sort of kind of make people, to as you said, to kind of crack their reality a bit, but through the playfulness, through the mystery.
Right.
So you got to have this. You got to have the realism of the structure and the outside, but then underneath you've got the kind of the trickster archetype, the Loki god. Those gods that are just actually giving a message that is sort of between the words, between the lines, that actually is what's having the real impact.
Awesome.
Not the thing that on the surface that looks really good, but the thing underneath.
Right.
Yeah. That's your job in the world.
That's awesome. Yeah. I looked for your chart. I couldn't see your. I looked for your chart online. I didn't see it anywhere.
I haven't sort of deliberately concealed it, but I just don't. I don't use it too much.
Right.
I kind of. I don't actually look at charts very much. I kind of have it so deep in me now. I sort of just read it in the field of people. I'm not just saying that to kind of sound cool. That's how I sort of.
Yeah. Well, you embody the information now. It's not information, you embody it, right? That's a different way of.
But it's fun also to have the codes sometimes and play with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been awesome. It's been really nice talking with you.
Oh, likewise. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I like the way your mind works. It's very it's a quantum mind you have there.
Awesome. Thank you. And you too. Like I say, to me you're a brother.
Yeah. Thank you.
Would you be open to another interview, another discussion in a bit when I have a little bit when I'm more focused on what I'm going to be focusing on in the documentary?
Absolutely.
Just for pre-production stuff too, but also my questions will be more focused in the future.
Absolutely. And what would be great is if you've gone quite a long way down the golden path journey, And like when you come to the Venus sequence, which is the kind of mid stage, I think that's where, that's where for most people, that's where it really gets interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will do it.
And actually, for you, it'd be great if you'd actually done the whole thing, even if you've kind of only done it on a cursory level, because your mind will pick up the whole story, and even though your body will and kind of emotions will need longer to integrate it, I think it's important that you kind of have like done the whole journey, so that you get to see the information that I've layered down from those 3 sequences, and you'll see that you'll totally get the story in it, because it's a lovely allegorical story, and it's laid out in steps, in stages, and it ends with the collective intelligence dawning, in a pearl sequence.
So it's clearly defined on your website, the process to go through this.
Yeah, it's the Golden Path program.
Okay.
So you just kind of sign up, part 1, part 2, part 3, and it's not expensive or anything. You do it step by step, and you can take it at your own pace. So each step just gives you resources, and it says, if you're on step 4, these are your resources. You can listen to this audio, read that text, that chapter of the book, and watch that webinar. And if that takes you 3 weeks, that's fine. It takes you 3 weeks, and then you move on to step 4 or step 5, whatever it is. And that's how you so you just fit your life around it.
Awesome.
In a kind of pacing way. Some people, they move quite fast. Some people, they take time.
Okay, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I was just saying, I think once you've got all that in you, you'll have some really good questions.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'll do that. And you're starting to turn into a black. It must be getting very dark there because you're turning into.
Oh yeah, it's really dark. Yeah.
So that's okay. So I'll take that as a sign that it's.
No, that's cool. Yeah. Anyway.
Awesome. I'll do that, and I'll be getting back to you.
Okay, Randall.
Cool.
Yeah.
What a pleasure to meet you and speak with you.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah.
Cool.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, you too.
And what are you gonna do with this recording? Can I so I can share it out with?
Yeah, I'll just put a little bit of a beginning and an end to it, and I'll put it up probably the next few days, and I'll send you the link if you want.
Right, that'd be perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks a
so
lot.
much. Yeah.
Take care.
You too.
Lovely to meet you.
Okay.
We'll speak in the future. In the future now.